G'day mate, how you going? For about a year and a half now, I've been taking photography as a half-serious, fun hobby. Before then, my experiences with cameras were phones, camcorders, and fiddling around with my grandpa's old camera when I was a toddler. It was only about 2 years ago when I first held and used a Nikon D80 DSLR that was hanging around in storage. It was pretty chunky and big, but it did make me feel like a professional photographer, even though I was as far away from that as you could possibly imagine. Okay, maybe not that far, but you get the idea. I was an inexperienced twat. I first got interested in photography from stumbling into random YouTube videos that mentioned anything to do with proper cameras, throwing around terms like shutter speed, aperture, ISO, etc, etc. And when I heard those terms, I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. And then I just kept watching more and more and more until I felt like I learned enough to where I could become a photographer. And also, hearing those terms made me feel smart. And I like feeling smart, so I jumped in. This wasn't re-recorded, I promise. I considered using my phone to take the photos, but it didn't have enough manual settings for my liking. So, I tried taking photos with the D80, but it turned out that it needed heavy repairs. So instead of getting it repaired for only about $100, I just bought another camera of the same model for $300 off eBay that was in much better condition. And that's when I started to learn photography. I took many pictures on it, a lot of them being kinda shit, but some of them were okay. If only I just had a preview screen to see how the photo would look before I took it. Also, it only being a stills camera and not taking video was a bit of a bummer. So at the beginning of last year, I bought a second-hand Nikon D3300 off eBay, which not only recorded 1080p 60fps video, had a live preview, but was also cheap and came with a wide-angle zoom lens. Now that's the fucking ticket, mate. I would show it, but it's recording the footage you're seeing right now, so... Oh, wait, hold on. There you go, now I can see it. Now that I had a good-ish camera, I needed a good-ish subject to take good-ish photos with. Fortunately, my good friend Dave, yeah, that's him, volunteered to model. And for the next year and a half, he would travel with me as my primary photography subject. And I will probably continue working with him for a long time to come. Don't ask. And that's when I like to think I started becoming good at photography. Oh, come on, guys! I could pick up a camera and estimate what settings I needed without really looking at the live preview, with a little help from the built-in digital light meter, snap a shot, and digitally alter it on a computer to make it look better later, because I suck at making it look good as soon as I take a photo. And around the same time I was regularly taking digital photos, I was watching people on YouTube talk about analog film photography, throwing around different terms this time like negative, development, silver halide, panchromatic, C41, etc, etc. This all piqued my interest, but it also seemed kind of scary and intimidating, you know? If you accidentally expose the entire roll of film for just a brief moment, you've destroyed it and ruined all your potentially good but probably mediocre photos. Or, in a less paranoid way, you ruin a roll of film from exposing it to light for too long and you just have to buy a new roll and you've learnt a new lesson. Oh well. So I then went down to my late grandfather's house and dug out some old bags that contain a bunch of camera stuff, including what I would come to know as an old Nikon F2 SLR camera that he used very frequently. And you could tell it was used frequently too. There were also some old Nikon lenses that were not only cool, but needed heavy restoration. Some of these are probably beyond repair. Oh, why did I release that out of the bag? Oh no. Why did I do that? Oh, get back in. The camera seemed fine enough to use, however. The winding key felt fine, the film door on the back felt securely dark. The only very noticeable problem right away is that when the shutter release was pressed, it wouldn't actually release the shutter, but it would flip the mirror up. To release the shutter, I would have to press down hard on the aperture preview button to get it to release. Also, the shutter speed dial was weirdly loose and not clicky, but I'm sure that won't be much of a problem later on. I then had a choice on what film to get. Because I was a dumb cunt who didn't do any research, I got 2 rolls of Fuji 200 C41 36 exposure 35mm film. If you don't know what those numbers and words mean, you can look them up yourself. Now, most people may respond to that with,
"Oh, no, Alex, you're not a dumb cunt. All you did was purchase film, and what's the problem with that?"
Well, I forgot to mention this, but I was intending on developing the film myself, using the popular and unashamedly lazy method of standard development. If you know about the differences between color films and black and white films, you know that color films are way more strict in terms of their development process. With black and white film, you have a bit of leeway in terms of the temperature you develop your film at, compared to color, which is way more strict and way more precise, which is why it was a bad decision for me to get color film to develop myself. And before you say anything, no, I did not end up developing it myself. We'll get to that later. So at this point, we're around the beginning of April this year, and I've just rolled up the film into the take-up reel, which means it's time to take some photos. I pulled out many things from my room to take photos with. The Auntie Donna Pud book, my digital camera, my lights, everything. And one thing I also noticed right away was how dirty the camera was. The viewfinder looked like a gammy old window that you would see on a 100-year-old building. See how filthy that is? Yeah, that ain't good. You also may see that there's a built-in light meter at the bottom here, which is why this purely mechanical camera has a battery compartment. But because this was living in an old leather bag for 8 years, I am not opening that shit and exposing myself to battery corrosion fumes. Instead, I'm using my digital camera to set exposure settings and transferring those settings as best I could onto the film camera. See? I'm smart. I can do things in weird ways. Of course though, I didn't just take photos inside. I took many outside shots. In my disgusting rotting furniture-filled backyard, my much better front yard, and that's about it. I should also say that with a lot of these sessions, I also brought my digital camera so I could compare the film and the digital photos. And because I'm a good camera owner, I would have a common tendency to fiddle with the camera, pressing the shutter release and winding the film while the lens cap was still on, which wasted possibly useful frames and therefore wasted a shit ton of money. If I had to give you a reason and/or excuse, I would say autism. It's autism. I'm autistic. That's still not a valid reason. I was probably just being a fucking fiddly wanker. At the end of April, I had used up all 36 frames of film, and it was time to roll up the film back into the spool and put it back in its canister for it to be developed later. Some cameras reel up the film automatically, but because this is purely analog and mechanical, I have to wind the film manually. First, I press this button at the bottom, which stops these turny parts from turning like a turner, and that allows me to use this rewinding crank beside the viewfinder to wind the film back into its cartridge. So, I did that exact thing. I pressed the button, wound the crank, and when it felt like it was all wound up, I opened the back using this little turning switch, and I could see that some film had not been wound up. Now, if this were just the little tongue of the film showing, that would be fine, but alas, it was not. It wasn't the entire reel. I could see that it was pretty much at the end, but it was enough to mean that my first couple photos were now destroyed. Oh well, they were rubbish anyway, so I just wound it all into the cartridge, put it in its canister, and put it somewhere safe. That was my first ever roll of film that I ever used in my entire life. And I weirdly felt proud of my work, even when I hadn't seen the images yet. That's not how I feel when taking digital photos. I still had another roll of film left, but I didn't want to deal with this broken camera bullshit. So instead of getting it repaired for only about $100, I just bought another camera of the same model for $300 off eBay that was in much better condition. You seen a pattern? The camera arrived, and it was in such beautiful condition, not even a pet rock could damage it. The shutter speed dial, the winding lever, the shutter release, the viewfinder, the camera looked and felt immaculate compared to my grandpa's. This also allowed me to buy some compatible batteries and use the built-in light meter, which honestly is a pretty fascinating thing, to the point I might make a separate video about it someday. Who knows? And that means it's time to put in the second roll of film and shoot again. We're now at the beginning of May, and I'm feeling good about this whole photography thing. Not that I wasn't feeling good about it previously, but I feel motivated to take more and more photos. So of course, the month that I'm feeling good about photography is the month where everything went wrong. I didn't take as many photos inside this time, but instead going outside some more to take photos of more backyard stuff, even more backyard stuff, and a little walk to my local shops to take some photos there. The digital versions I was quite proud of, so I was intrigued to see what the film versions looked like. When I got back home, I had taken a photo of something that I had never taken a photo of before on film. Dave. Yeah, for some reason I wasn't crazy about taking photos of Dave. In fact, that second roll was the only roll that Dave was on. The possible reason we'll get to later. And by later, I mean right now. The film advance lever also acts as a switch to turn on the camera's light meter. By turning it ever so slightly, it will flip to this position, showing a red dot, indicating that the light meter is turned on. If you advance it further, it advances the film and flings back to whatever position you left it in before. Why do I bring this up? Well, during the time I was taking the backyard photos, my camera strap somehow got caught in between the film advance lever and the camera body. Instead of doing the normal thing, which would probably be to take it out carefully and slowly, I instead started to panic and tried to get it out by force, which resulted in the lever now flinging back in a really unsatisfying and not fun and very wrong way. And that also resulted in the light meter being permanently turned on until the batteries ran out. I was still able to press the shutter button though, so I continued shooting on my jolly way. We're now in the late days of May. I'm hanging around in the sunroom area of my house, and I have my camera with me. The way the sun's light was going through the windows looked pretty cool to me, so I got my camera out and started taking pictures. And just 2 shots in, suddenly the shutter release was stuck and would not press down. Can't be hit anymore. It's acting like you hadn't wound the lever, but the lever was acting like you had already wound the fucking thing. And that means, even though I hadn't used up the entire roll yet, I was unable to shoot more frames. So I rewound the film with the crank, put the rolled up spool in its canister, and put it somewhere safe with the other roll. Now, I think I would be lying if I said I didn't want to continue shooting film, but because of me being a fucking idiot and breaking the camera that arrived to my house not even a month ago at that point, I couldn't shoot anymore. This means I have 2 options. You know the drill. I either get it repaired for only about $100, or I just buy another camera of the same model for $300 off eBay that's in much better condition. Can you guess which one I picked? That's right. I picked to get the camera repaired. Did I say the camera? I meant the cameras. Both of them. I just haven't sent them off yet because I wanted to get the shots for this video. I would much rather keep breaking the same camera for cheaper instead of breaking multiple cameras for expensive. The next step after this would be developing the film, but around this time I know that developing color film is a lot more strict and critical than black and white film, and developing it myself would most likely not end well. So the thing to do would be to look up a place that develops film and preferably gives me digital scans of the photos and the original negatives as well. When I tried to research any places near me that could develop film, a lot of them were quite far away, and just thinking about the fact that people could look at my photos before I could wasn't that appealing. Also, probably the fact that I was dealing with arguably much more important personal shit at the time that was taking up all my time and energy and patience, and let's just leave it at that. So after depression happened, we're now in September this year. And I put getting my film developed around the top of my priority list. I did another research tangent and found a camera place that fitted my needs, wasn't super far away, and also seemed to have good reviews, called Digital Camera Warehouse. More specifically, their partner company, Kent Street Studio. Also, to clarify, I am not sponsored by these guys. I think their services were just good and easy to use, and I recommend them. Now, to the smart people who've probably left this video halfway and already commented about this, because I'm a young zoomer in 2024, I never considered that going to the post office and mailing off the film was an option. So I sent off the film to be scanned, developed, and sent back to me. And not only would they digitally scan the images into high quality TIFF files, they would also send them to me through Dropbox instead of posting a flash drive to me or some shit. We're now on the 20th of September, and I've just ordered off of the Camera Place's website to develop 2 rolls of film, receive high quality digital scans, and the negatives posted back to me, which all round adds up to about 91 Australian dollars, which is good enough for me. They rang me up and they were surprisingly nice and coherent and straightforward, which is not my usual experience with phone calls. I then paid the money and waited for stuff to go down. 10 days later, on the 30th of September, I get an email from the camera people with an invite to a Dropbox folder titled 997492 Alex last name. I click into the folder, which has 2 folders inside of it. These are the 2 rolls of film, now each photo digitally scanned as TIFF files. Obviously. 11 days later, on the 9th of October, I get a parcel at my front door with the Kent Street Studio logo all over it, and opening the package revealed that it was the film negatives that they sent back to me in these special negative holders. And these did reveal that there were sadly a bunch of wasted frames on both rolls, and the second roll has no photos after a certain point. Oh well. But even with those downers, the utter joy and excitement of clicking into both of these folders and looking at these negatives in person, finally seeing my photos that I took come to life almost half a year later, is a feeling that I haven't felt in a really long time. Even if some of the photos looked kinda like shit, I would rather shoot those duds than try my best to be an absolute perfectionist for every shot. It's a learning experience, right? Nothing's perfect on your first shot, or sometimes not even your 1000th shot, but that doesn't mean I can't be proud. Here's some photos from both the film camera and the digital camera side to side. Even if the digital versions look objectively better, like them not being as grainy, or the colors looking better, or they're more in focus, or whatever, the magic of snapping a shot on a film camera, knowing that you have a very limited amount of shots, trying your best to compose the frame and having your subject be in the center, be in focus, be exposed correctly, is a magic that you simply cannot recreate with a digital camera. There's a vibe to these photos. There's a feel to the photos, an authentic and loving feel. And I'm not trying to be a pretentious wanker by being like,
well, my photos actually have passion and love put into them, unlike every other photographer.
No. Any film photo compared to a digital photo, to me, just feels like it has more love and passion poured into it. Maybe it's just the fact that these are real-life grains of silver with red, green, and blue dyes that were previously assaulted by photons, instead of a neat grid of red, green, and blue pixels with metadata and such. But either way, film photography is a beautiful scientific art form that I'm really glad is making a revival. Now, I'm gonna do something that I don't think I've ever done before, and that's to promote my Instagram page to you. If you wanna see some more of these film photos, give it a follow. Or else. Now, this is a different style of YouTube video that I've never really done before, so I hope you found it at least kind of interesting to watch, but TLDR. Film photography is cool, and I hope you find it cool too. If you hate it, then you can fuck off. Good night, mate, and I hope your day was good.